I think my sermon would be much more entertaining if those kids were surrounding me, pelting me with questions and thoughts and ideas. But sorry, you're just stuck with me here for a moment. Throughout Advent and the Christmas season, we've been talking about God coming to us, the prophet promising it, the people preparing for it, and then God's arrival in a manger on a silent night, a holy night. Mary and Joseph, Elizabeth and Zechariah, Anna and Simeon, the shepherds, to all of them God came in the form of an angel, in a dream, in bright light and song. God to them, we say. God came to them. And we say here, 2,000 years later, God in fact came to the whole world. And then the Christmas season ends here in the new year at the Feast of Epiphany, which was officially Friday, right? It's the after 12 days of Christmas lands Epiphany. So it was Friday, January 6th, but we're celebrating it today as a community with this service, and then a meal tonight in the Tucker Room, potluck, that you are welcome. We hope you will consider coming and joining us. In the Tucker Room at 5:30, we'll have a potluck. We'll eat some cake, and in the cake will be a few beans, I think, and the beans will dictate who the three kings are that bring us through the church to a place where the manger is. That's what we'll do tonight. And it's good to end the season this way, this season of God's coming as we move into the new year. And through Epiphany, we remember that also we must go to God. Like the wise men who journeyed from Persia to Israel, it's now time for us to consider in this new year how, if we want a healthy, strong, dynamic, engaged relationship with God, it's going to take some work on our part. It doesn't just happen. Like, none of our relationships just happen, right? They all take engagement and work and working on maintaining the health of them, right? So it's true with God as well. It's going to take some work. It's going to take our pursuing it. It's going to take, in many instances, a journey, either an inward one or an outward one or a both and, but a willingness to move towards God. So using the Matthew story of the Magi as our guide, I want to lift up for us this morning 5 lessons from the Magi's journey to the Christ child that might inform our own pursuit of God. Okay, so let's get to it. Lesson 1. All right? What we quickly witness from the story, for the sake of our journeys, is that Magi is plural for magus. It wasn't a magus that came from the east, a single wise man or member of the ancient Persian priestly caste, but it was a group of them, Magi. We don't know that there were 3 of them, even though that's what our pageants suggest and pictures always portray 3. We only know that there were 3 gifts, right, that they brought. But according to Matthew, what we do know is that there was more than 1. There might have been 6 of them who brought gold, frankincense, and myrrh. I'm sorry to crush your, image of, oh my gosh, what? There weren't 3 wise men? Maybe there were. All we know is that there were more than 1. Right? So this is our first lesson that rubs against our individualistic culture, that if we are going to pursue God, we must do so together, not alone. It's not an individual pursuit. Good job being here this morning. That's a good start, that you've come to worship God with this community. That's a key thing. That's a significant part of why we do church, is because we journey to God together. It's not about our own individual heroic pursuit of spiritual enlightenment, but a communal movement in that direction. Where two or three are gathered, Jesus says, not one. Where two or three are gathered, there I am also. Right? It's not, I, one king of Orient am. That would sound terrible. It's we three kings of Orient are. The spiritual pursuit of God is necessarily a joint one, and there are such benefits in that joint journey, not least of which is that we are less likely to get lost in ourselves or by ourselves. I've always loved that they say in Alcoholics Anonymous, to encourage people to stay connected to one another. That, they have all these wonderful little quips in AA, and one of these is, your own head is a bad neighborhood that you don't want to be caught in alone. Don't get caught in the neighborhood of your own head alone. We are meant to pursue God together. Lesson 1. Lesson 2. From the story of the Magi's journey to God is that it simply takes getting up and going in the first place. And that's a bigger job for many of us than we might first imagine. But it takes getting up and going out beyond our comfort zones, out of those places where we hold power and control and are really comfortable. We are in power and control in our own little Persias. But the pursuit of God might very well and often does ask of us to go into Herod's territory, wherever that might be, where we not only hold less power, but are at the mercy of the power of others, maybe, where we are foreigners, no longer totally safe, where we are vulnerable. That's what the Magi did, and in doing so, you then realize how important lesson 1 is. That we don't do it alone, but we do it together. Lesson 2, we push ourselves out of our comfort zones to find God, to pursue what is good and right. And like the Magi, often that push beyond our comfort zone is a matter of standing up or pressing against the status quo, the authority, right? That's lesson 2. Pressing ourselves out of the comfort zone. Lesson 3, if we are going to pursue God, we must be prepared and ready to admit that we not only can make mistakes along the way, that we have to course correct for, but that we are really adept at deceiving ourselves and being deceived by others. That's a really important point here from the Magi for our pursuit of God. The deadly sin of pride lurks very, very close to the pilgrim in pursuit of God. And so much trouble has been made and had from those who are serious about their engagement and pursuit of God, but not so serious and diligent about their own capacity, tendency, penchant for self-deception and self-justification. Right? Right there at the center of the story of the Magi is the tyrant Herod, who tries to deceive the Magi into telling him where the infant is, so, quote, I can go and worship him. Right? And the Magi, you could say, even deceive themselves by making their first stop, the local authority, asking them, where the newborn king was to be found. Are you kidding me? That was not going to go over well, Magi. Come on, wise peeps. And apparently, they would have gone back to Herod had they not been warned in a dream not to go back. Not very wise-sounding men, huh? We are not as wise as we believe ourselves to be, and are more susceptible to deception than we know. Lesson 3, Be on guard for how easily the pursuit of God can become a pursuit of something else or something lesser or something opposite with our barely realizing it. The fourth lesson from the Magi story is that the end or the culmination of the journey, the pursuit, which is ideally God, God's self, is likely going to be a surprise. Something, someone, some reality that we didn't quite expect. But what did we expect? It was God we are seeking, right? That breaks open our reality. And the surprise likely will be that God's presence, apparently from what the scriptures reveal and say to us, the surprise likely will be that God's presence is in the small, the meek, the lowly, the poor, the everyday, the unexpected, the average things that we are more likely to overlook than to expect. You see how the Magi first went to the king. Of course, they went to the king to seek the newborn king. And they went to the palaces to seek this babe born to be king. And it took them a little while to accept that the star they were following was leading them not to glamorous Jerusalem, but to podunk Bethlehem. And in that podunk town, not even into the nicest house there, or even the best room in that not-so-nice house, but rather to where the animals lay. Again, not such wise men necessarily, but can you blame them? As Paul put it, the wisdom of this world is foolishness before God, and God's wisdom often appears as foolishness. The wisdom of this world is foolishness before God, and God's wisdom often appears as foolishness. That line, that teaching is smack right in the middle of our faith tradition, of our religion, with a manger and a cross at the center of it. Our wisdom compared to God's wisdom. The wisest of men and women are not above mistaking the wisdom of God for foolishness, and we shouldn't be either as we pursue God. And the fifth and final lesson, I'm sure there are many others in this rich, rich story, but 5 that I'm lifting up today. What is the lesson from the star? That's not one of my lessons, but it's there. What is the lesson from the star? I'd be interested in hearing. But 5th lesson, all right, is what must be done if and when we finally do get there and accept the surprise of where we find God. The end point, surprise, surprise, is not about our own fulfillment and enlightenment and what we gain from the object of our journey and our pursuit of God, but rather it's about what we give. The Magi arrive with gifts, and though they might have been surprised to see this rando family in a barn among the animals, as poor as dirt, they bow down onto their mighty knees and give him gifts. They don't gain from the experience, they give into it. There's our wise men. There's our wise men. Maybe some of them were women, come on, too, right? There's our wise people. It's not about them and how they are and what they get. It's about him and who God is and what they've given of themselves and what the world gets through God. That's what they catch a glimpse of. Not what's in it for them, but what the world is about to receive from God. Eventually, they get up off that ground, having given their gifts, and they return home praising God and knowing that something fundamental changed in the world, and that was enough. That's what they got. The opportunity to unload and give of themselves. For it wasn't about them, it was about God. So as I say, there are probably more, but those are at least 5 lessons from the journey of the Magi to help our own pursuit of God. 1, it's not supposed to be done alone. 2, it requires getting out of our comfort zones. 3, we should be ever on the watch for our own tendency to deceive ourselves and others in the pursuit. 4, we should expect to have our expectations subverted and find God in the common more than in the glorious. And finally, it's not about what we gain, but what we can give when we discover God. And that journey, that pursuit and that giving is quite simply what we are made for. The journey to God, the pursuit of God, the pursuit of love, the pursuit of truth, pursuit of God. And then that giving when we discover it in moments in our lives. That is what we are made for. So welcome to 2023, and welcome to the journey towards God here with First Congregational Church in Winchester. I am glad to have you as a fellow journeyman, fellow journey person along this way. Amen.